Hey guys, this is PowerTech1999, and today I'm going to show you how I made this Japanese style pole saw. Now I'm actually using a push saw, so if we flip it around and lay out our lines or our saw on the nose of the saw blade, it'll actually cut whenever we pull, which is what we want. After that I went ahead and cut it out, and I utilized the side that already had teeth, so I didn't have to make two sets of teeth, I only had to make one. In order to mark out the teeth, I needed a pretty clean and visible surface. So I scuffed up the saw blade with some sandpaper, that way it got all shiny. I also needed to flatten the surface so that no teeth were bigger than the others. I used a file and a belt sander for that. Now I'm just marking out where the teeth will go, or where I need to cut rather, and they're about a little under 1/4 of an inch, I believe, in height and diameter. Cut them out using my angle grinder, and I cut the flat portion first, and then I cut the bevels second. Next came one of the most tedious parts. I got to sharpen each one of these teeth with a small flat file, and I started out sharpening the bevels. Once all the bevels are done, then I moved on to the straight portions. And man, look at all the concentration going on in that face. Here you can see I flipped the blade around. I'm on the crosscut portion now, and I just had to sharpen each one of those teeth also. I turned a pretty simple pine handle for the saw. It's out of a 2x4, and it doesn't really matter what it looks like or what kind of wood it's made out of, because it's going to be wrapped up in some twine later on. Now, if you don't have a lathe, that's fine. You can go down to the big box store and pick up a dowel rod that's about the diameter of your saw handle. You just saw me cut off a little stem from the lathe, and after that I'm going to cut a slit almost all the way down the handle. I keep it in one piece so it's a little bit stronger. Then I'll use some epoxy and glue the saw inside the handle. Once we have epoxy everywhere, we'll put the saw inside the handle and clamp it up with some duct tape. As usual, the glue up wasn't perfect, so we had to trim that up. And then here comes another tedious part. With saw blades, if you keep the teeth just plain straight, it won't be able to cut very far into wood, because it'll just kind of bind in there and you won't be able to push or pull it. So to prevent that, you bend the teeth slightly right then left in an alternating pattern. I don't know how it works, but it does. And after that, we'll go ahead and drill a hole in the handle so I can put a pin, that way I can hang it up in my workshop. Now don't you worry, I didn't go out and spend money on this pin, it's actually an old aluminum arrow shaft. The only thing I actually did spend money on was the jute twine, and I used that because it's a little bit stronger than actual twine and epoxy. Well, we'll get to that later. I start gluing the jute twine in a spiral at the bottom, and then move that all the way up the shaft of the handle. And I also make sure that I'm not obstructing the pin. Now, just holding a straight jute twine handle will get pretty uncomfortable after a while, and it also started to disintegrate. So to prevent that, I stabilized it in epoxy. That's going to form a nice hard layer around the twine. It's going to soak into it, make it a good, strong, sturdy handle. Now here's a cutting test. With the crosscut part of the blade, I cut 1.5 inches down to 2x4 in 21 seconds. And then for the ripping part of the blade, that's the teeth that I actually made myself. I cut down about 4 or 5 inches in 24 seconds. So it's a pretty good overall saw. It's a really great idea by the Japanese people. And yeah.